There we go. Hey, okay. So I just did this great intro talking about how we're going to talk about dynamic apex. It was amazing. You're just going to have to take my word for it because the mic wasn't working. You know it's live when there's technical issues. That's all I'm going to say. I'll leave it there. All right, so we're going to dive into dynamic apex today. Thank you to our moderators and to everyone for joining in. And let's see. I think we have audio working now. Can anybody want to verify the audio working? Yay, sound. Okay, thank you, Triopticon, for pointing that out. Yeah. Okay, so we're going to dive in and we're going to talk about doing things with dynamic apex. Now, dynamic apex means a lot of things to a lot of different people. When I say dynamic apex, it covers a whole slew of things, everything from looking at your schema to also trying to figure out what sort of features are enabled. And so we're going to start with that because it's kind of been bugging me. I've got some code in here. Let me open this. Can the user class. Let me open that. And one of the things that this does is this makes use of platform cache builder. And the problem with that is if you miss a step, it's like one line in the README of setting up your org for Apex recipes, this breaks. And as a result, since everything else uses can the user, it all goes downhill from there. So what I want to do is I want to find a way to determine if platform cache is a feature that is available to me. Now, I spoke internally with a bunch of different people and I got pointed in several different directions, and it turns out that we don't really have a great way of looking up to see if a feature is enabled. So what we've done is we've had to come up with some code that allows us to figure it out on the fly, and we're going to implement this as our first example of dynamic apex. So to start with this, I'm going to hit the right command key here, Command Shift P on a Mac, Control Shift P if you're on Windows, and I'm going to do create a class, create apex class. I'm going to put in here, my first instinct is to name it ICANN has feature, but that's probably not like a greatest example, so we'll call the class feature. Yeah, features. We'll put it there, and then we're going to put it in a custom directory. We're going to put it in our shared code. All right, so with this here, I'm going to give us a nice little doc block, and we'll get rid of these two. We don't document those. That's in Git. And then for our description here, now what we're going to do is we're going to put in the class is responsible for helping determine if specific platform features are enabled in the current org. Okay, that's what I want to accomplish with this. So let's go ahead and what do we get a squiggly? What's the squiggly for? Avoid empty, whatever. Okay, I don't want this to be an instantiated class, but I am going to do inherited sharing. Inherited is always hard for me to spell. Inherited sharing. All right, there we go. Now, I want this class to be set up in such a way that I can just say, do I have this feature? So feature dot platform cache. And it'll give me back true or false. So what I'll do is I'll set this up as methods. We'll do public static. Okay, well, it doesn't like that. Okay. It doesn't like that I've got a file apparently missing. We'll deal with that here in a second. Public static Boolean, and I'm going to say platform cache. Right, and then how do we go about looking at an org? This is what makes it dynamic. At runtime, we're going to look back into our org. In other languages, they call this reflection. Some languages are super reflective. One of the languages that I sort of like my native language is Ruby, and Ruby is highly reflective. I can open a class, look at it, pull out a list of methods in it. I can do all sorts of stuff with that. But it's a little bit more difficult in more statically typed or strongly typed languages. So we're gonna try and rely on some features failing in order to determine if platform cache is available. So one of the things that I want to do here is I also want to say that this is a this is a check that we probably don't want to use over and over again. So when we're gonna do this, we're gonna memoize it inside our individual classes that use it. And so to start with, how do we determine if the platform cache is enabled? Well, I'm gonna start with a try block, and I'm gonna catch exception. We'll do exception like that. And so for our try here, the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to try and access the platform cache. And the theory here is that if I don't have platform cache enabled, it'll fall to the catch block. And so when I try this, if I do this if I do org cache is equal to cache.org. Now, if you remember our memoization and our work with can the user, this is how we access the platform cache. Cache.org.get partition, and I'm going to say default. Okay. Now, it occurs to me I may not remember that perfectly well, so let me keep it over here and do our platform cache Apex search. Here's our platform cache developers guide. And I'm going to look at store and retrieve values from the org cache. And I want the default cache. How do I get the default cache? Default. Hey, to refer to the default partition and namespace of the invoking class, omit the namespace partition prefix. Not quite what I was looking for. Platform cache partitions. We're going to look at the partition class, and I'm going to look. Do we have a get default? I thought there was a get default. That's the session cache. Org partition class. That's the main partition. I think we can just leave that and just say get partition. Let's try that. So let's do this. We're just going to do get partition. That. And then down here, we're going to, just for grins and giggles, we're going to put in a system debug. System debug. And we'll do failed to get org cache. Now, I happen to know that I have org cache set up on this particular org. So we're going to see if this, we shouldn't get this if we run this. Now we've got a red squiggly here. Unexpected token try. Okay, so we'll say Boolean, and we'll call this cache available is equal to false. And then here we'll say, because we don't really care about getting the org cache, we just want to call it. We'll say cache available equal true. And then down here we'll return cache available is equal to false. Actually, we don't have to do anything because it's set to, it's defaulting to false. So we have a safe fallback. Return cache available. Okay, so now we're trying to save this. We may actually have to deal with this whole like missing resource. Saving. Okay. Missing component resource. Missing source file. Dependencies.resource. So let's go down here and look at why that might be happening. We're looking for not tests, but static resources. And we've got we are missing a file there. So let me just try and pull it. sfdx pull source and override conflicts. Yeah. We'll live dangerously. We'll override conflicts. While we're doing that, let's see if anybody has any questions. SF Nerdy wants to know, why do we really need platform cache? SF Nerdy, I would love to answer that question, but you're going to have to give me a few more guide rails on that. It was, why do you need platform cache at all? Or why do you need platform cache for this? So help clarify your question just a little bit, and I'm happy to jump in on that one. Platform cache is wonderful for speeding up your code on long-running or expensive calculations, especially on the per user or per session basis. So if you've got something that you want to go save, say a map of what they can and cannot do in terms of permissions, if you want to take that can the user work and save it in the system partition or the session partition, that's a very quick and easy way of doing that. And then you do it once, and then you get the cache results every other time, and it's much faster. That's my pitch for why do you need platform cache overall. In particular, this kind of thing is that's a broader question. Let me see here. Can we save this now? Public static boolean. Saving. Line 13 misspelling. System, yep, I do have a system debug there. Failed to push. It's really not liking that, that I've got a missing, well, let's look at our org. All right, so we'll go over to our org and we'll look at static resources. And dependencies, I'm just gonna delete it. We don't need it for this branch. Get rid of it here. And then what I'll do is I'll pull again, pull and override conflicts. And while we're doing that, I'm trying to figure out platform cache, and it doesn't like that because I don't have those. That's better. It's formatted, push source to scratch org, oh, that's still the old one. Okay. SF Nerdy says, in general, not specific to this functionality you're building. Okay. ePastor wants to know, do you need to turn your platform cache property into a method, or maybe wrap the code you have in it to get a block to get it as a property? Yeah, that was what was causing. I had forgotten to put the parentheses there. Espose, sir? Hope I'm not massacring your name. I'm really sorry. But yes, so platform cache, SF Nerdy, recap. It's great for accelerating expensive calculations for things that you have to do all the time. So my go-to example for that is accelerating permissions checking. So if we cache our permissions, we only have to calculate it once, and then for the rest of that session, the user can rely on the cache. So we've got our method there. It looks like we were, did it not let me push again? Let's save this. Are you gonna be mean to me? Don't be mean to me. No whammies, no whammies. Joseph wants to know why I use inherited sharing instead of with sharing. So inherited sharing will inherit, I mean, I don't mean to be like duh, but it's going to inherit the sharing of whatever quiddity caused this particular thing to fire, which is important because if you have with sharing, that may not be the same level of restriction that your calling code has. And so if you use inherited, whatever the calling code uses, this will use. But that's a great question, Joseph. I'm glad you asked that. We're still having a missing source file. Okay. Well, I'm going to show you a trick that I've sort of written in here. And that is I have the ability to spin up a new org pretty quickly using the org init. So here in my repo, and if you check out Apex recipes, you have this too. I've got org-init.sh, and just as there's no magic involved here. This is just the code required to spin up a new scratch org with this. So I'm going to spin up a new scratch org with the data currently in my checkout. So we'll let this spin up. and it is going to name it Apex Recipes, capital A, capital R. Looks like we might have had oh yeah, transaction finalizers are now beta, so you don't have to turn them on. So let's go up to our configuration, so config project, and we no longer need this one. There we go, and you see that I've got platform cache in there. We do need that one in order for this to work. It'll be interesting to test this. How do we test that this provides... That's a thought experiment. SF Nerdy wants to know if cache can be used in sites and communities. That's a great question. I think so, but I've never tried it. Oh, this is still running. Oops. Okay, let's try that again. Organ it. While this does its thing, we'll make this a little bit bigger. And we can look at, we'll do Salesforce, I think. Salesforce, platform cache communities. I'm going to look at the limitations here. Platform cache limits. Do org cache. I think it can. I may have to get back to you on that one, SF Nerdy. That's a great question, because I think it can be used in It's a great question. All right, this is apparently creating our org correctly now. This is good. Woot woot. I love we have this little progress bar. It's the little things that make me happy. Okay. Only standard components. Default prompt standard. Okay. Well, you know things are going interesting when you can't push code. Let's look at this. I don't have anything in my prompts directory. So let me refresh that. I've been having this problem recently with Visual Studio Code where it doesn't refresh my Explorer on the left. I don't know if you've had that. There's a command to fix that called refresh Explorer. So let's look at this. It failed pushing. Well, it failed on our feature class, so that's important. But it also failed pushing the prompt standard service cloud information, which, let's just, for grins and giggles, go look at our prompts menu. So we're going to cd into force app, and then we can go into main default, and then go into prompts, and I'm just going to nuke all these because these are all ones that it was trying to push. Yes. And then okay, let's try this again. Now, saving. Maybe. While we're saving here, Deepak wants to know, from where can I download the dynamic Apex code? I appreciate it if you can share the link to the source in the GitHub repo. So let's do that. Let's go look at it. We're going to go to github.com/trailheadapps, and sure. Cancel. You know, it's not going to let me because I'm not signed in. So let me try this again. I'm going to open a new incognito window. We'll go to GitHub Trailhead Apps. now that I'm logged out here, you can see that we've got all sorts of code bases here under the sample apps gallery. And one of the ones that we have is, if I scroll down, is Apex recipes. And if we go in there, you'll find all of the code for everything we have worked on codeLive. So when I get done with the dynamic recipes bit, it'll be in here as well. So this one has all of everything you need, and we've even got a quick start trailhead module for you to go through, and a whole bunch about how to spin this up, that sort of thing. You can always cheat and use that org setup bit. But while we do that, let's do this. I'm going to clean up a little bit so we don't get confused. So this is our new Scratch org. And then, okay, method does not exist. Incorrect signature from cache.org. So get partition. Let's see if we have .get partition. I wonder if get capacity would tell us. Let's look at the docs for that, because if we look at platform cache, safely cache value. Okay, so features. Do we get so it's going to be in our org class, and we're going to have, scrolling through here, scrolling, constants, methods. If we get capacity, percentage of org cache that has been used. I bet you that would throw an error if we don't have it. Let's try that. Okay? So we're going to use get capacity instead of get partition. Saving. Okay, more questions here. John B says, cool. Not sure what that was in reference to. And then, yep, okay. So we're still saving. Hopefully this is going to go through its thing. Maybe saving. I feel like I need like a Frank Sinatra song going in the background, just sort of, you know, it saved it its way. That didn't work as well out loud as it did in my head, but there we go. There we go. Push there. Oh, look at all that. Look at all that code that it pushed. Okay. Perfect. I love it. And then what we can do is, since we pushed here, some of these things are going to fail like this. So we're going to make sure these commands run. Apex recipes, perm set, that's the important one. Walkthrough is great. And then I'm going to execute this one. This is a little bit of, we're going to look at this, a little bit of code here in just a second. Make sure that this is run. Raw. Setup.apex. Let's try that again. Force apex dx force what main default? I'm in the wrong directory. Helps if I can hit the right thing. All right. So yeah, here we go. Now I can execute this. It'll be good. New updates to this, John. I think you can, if I remember correctly, it's, you know, it's odd. I don't really star my own repos, but I think if you star the repo, it tells you when there's a new release or a new push to it. So you'll get to see that. There's usually a delay of a couple weeks because what happens is we'll code something on codeLive and then I'll go in and make sure that there's documentation and that there's no spelling errors. And then I'll get one of my colleagues to go and look at it and code review it. And then finally it'll get merged. So there's a little bit of a delay there, but you know, it works great. So, okay, we've got our feature class here. We've set this up so that we can do this. We should be able to call this now in an org with platform cache enabled and see that we get this come back as true. So let's do that. I've got this entitled one over here. Now I like using execute anonymous in here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do system debug and I'll do feature dot, what did we call that method? We called it platform cache. Feature dot platform cache. And I'm going to highlight that. Hit Shift Command P or Control Shift P, and I'm going to do execute anonymous with currently selected text. Now what that's going to do is it's going to go and it's going to give us the output, and it's going to say feature does not exist feature. Okay, did I misspell that? I don't think so. Feature.platform cache. It is a public static method, so platform cache, that should be just fine. Maybe I need to save this. Grins and giggles, maybe? So we'll let it save. While we do that, I'm going to get a sip of liquid here while we save. Okay. So that's saved. That's great. Let's try that again. Execute anonymous with editor contents. And we failed to run. Variable does not exist feature. Public class feature. Public static boolean, platform cache. There's no errors there that I can see. Okay, and then let's look and see what we've got going on. Because here it's going to give us line 1, column 14. I'm pretty sure that's that. Does not exist feature. Feature.platform cache. Feature, is that's not a reserved word. Just for grins and giggles. Apex reserved words. Reserved words. Go down, extends, okay. False, finally, float, for, from. Okay, we are not having that issue. Somebody says, wild guess, remove with inherited sharing. That shouldn't be the problem, but we'll test it. Our other classes, all of them use inherited sharing. And I'm even relatively certain that I spelled that right, even though inherited is a word that causes me no end of grief with spelling. Let's try this again. Well, it sure fails quickly. At least that's going on for us. Put that back. Okay. Feature, public class feature. We could try renaming it. Feature class. We could. I don't know why that would be. I'm going to do something interesting here. I'm going to go over here to our org that it opened for us. I'm going to go to developer console. Beast was wondering if we could share a a set of recommendations for configuring your Visual Studio Code with extensions or something instead of a video would be helpful for efficiency. And as it turns out, I'm about to release a highly opinionated extension pack, but it's an extension pack with multiple things in it with this is how I do it. But it's just me. It's not Salesforce. It's Kevin Foreman, CodeFryer, how CodeFryer does things. It'll have all of the things, including my glorious theme here, Cody's in bed by 10, and all of the extensions I use. And so you'll be able to click on it, install it. I'll make a big to-do on the Twitters about that when I get that released in the bright, shining future. So we went into our org to look at this. I want to see if I can open my class feature. Okay. Everything looks like it should work there, so let's try it this way. Open execute anonymous. We're going to do system debug feature dot platform cache like that, and we'll execute. And that was a success. So let's see what this gives us. And where's my debugs? Here, I'll click on debug only. Failed to get org cache and false. That's interesting. So just for grins and giggles, we're going to go make sure platform cache is enabled. Platform cache. And we're not using any of it. We've got a default namespace, default partition. Oh, maybe this is what we need to do. I forgot about that. Default partition. So as it turns out, you cannot package a default partition. So I can't set this up in a way that will allow you to push it that also has the default cache enabled. So let's try it that way. Let's see if this fixes things. That was a false. Our first attempt was a false. We're going to execute last again. And we'll pull open this. And we'll click debug only. True! Woohoo! Okay. So, what have we learned? We've learned that even when there's not an official sanctioned easy way to like go check if something's available, we can actually write code that'll allow us to check to see if this feature is available. And we can use that in our CanTheUser class here. Now, if you remember back, our CanTheUser class is responsible for determining whether or not a user has FLS or CRUD permissions to a particular field or object. And to do that, it has these two maps here, accessible fields by object and updatable fields by object, that allows you to come in here and say, can the user edit, an account, or can the user delete an account? And it'll come back and tell you yes or no. And we can see whether or not a field is accessible or not, and it uses this cache builder. Now, the cache builder is a nice simple way to automatically wrap your code in cache. So if you provide one method in the cache here called doLoad, and this doLoad method is responsible for populating the cache the first time. Now, if the cache comes back and says there's nothing here, it will run this doLoad method to populate the cache and then return the value to you. So this is a way of doing what I refer to as memoization. Now, I've come to learn that memoization is not a widely known term. It's a Ruby way of talking about things. It's saying set a value if it doesn't already exist. So set a value if it's null, otherwise return the value that's currently set. And we do this here by doing our calculations with results. So let's refactor this to use our feature code to determine whether or not we have a valid cache setup. And so when we come down here to this, let's scroll down through a little bit. I think it's at the bottom if I remember correctly. Okay. So we need to say we've got the memoize the field level for them. Actually, that's the metadata one, FLS. And here we go. Here's our cache partition, default session, get default partition, session, and here we are putting our results in place. So if we look at this and say, okay, get FLS for field on object is going to use our platform cache here, if we've got it, and we want to wrap that in a check. And I just want to do a time check. I'm going to dedicate 4 more minutes to this, and then we'll move on to the next type of dynamic Apex. Had some issues with the bit there, and had some issues with the org. Had to reset. Okay, so let's look at permission cache. Where is permission cache used? Okay. And it's only used in the implementation here, or the definition, and then in the implementation here for FLS for field on object. Okay. So we want to say if feature.platform cache, do this. Oh, format. Okay. And then else, if it's not available, we're just going to put the results here. So this is our object results default session. We're gonna have to refactor our class here a little bit. So if we come up here and we do to our class definition. Okay, our do load method, everything's wrapped up in this do load method, which isn't optimal because now we can't refactor this. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to extract the work here, this bit of work that it's actually going to do, and I'm going to put it in its own method. So I'm going to do is public, I forget what type it's going to be, so I have to fill that in here in just a second. Calculate FLS, and we're going to do that, and we're going to take string object type, just like we did there, put this here. Okay, and this is going to give me a map of SLF's type results, and this is going to just return the results. So I need to have whatever results is as my type. So do results. This is our method type. There we go. Calculate FLS. Now what I'm going to do here is I'm going to say return calculate FLS with object type. Now you may be going, why'd you do that? Well, because what I'm going to do down here is I'm going to use the same method, calculate FLS type, but instead of putting it in the cache, I'm going to put it in a class variable. So like this, I'm going to say public static, no, I don't want to do that. That would not be wise. That could leak permissions across different things. But down here, when I'm doing this, what I'm going to call at the other end of my class, scrolling. Okay, so if we don't have this, then what I'm going to do is I'm going to return, actually no, I'm not. I'm going to say do this way. Boop. Object results, and then we're going to do object results is equal to that. Otherwise, I'll say object results is equal to platform cache. That's not what I called it. Permission cache. Permission cache dot calculate. What do I call that method? Permission cache. We have calculate FLS. Why is it not picking it up? It's weird. Calculate FLS with object type. Like that. Okay, and so we're calling that. Now the rest of our code will use this down here. So we have a transparent ability to use platform cache if it's available, and to defer back to just a regular non-cached variable if that doesn't exist. Let's see. Calculate FLS string. Let's go to line 56. I bet you that will fix it. Oh yeah, hey, look at that. I'm not returning anything, so it's not valid. Let's do return results. Return results. Boom. That'll work. Spelling correction needed. Uh-oh. Calculate FLS has a spelling error. Let's do calculate. Good eyes. Good eyes. Actually, that is also must calculate. Calculate. Let's make sure we're using the right spelled version here, and that we're using it up here. Refactoring is fun. There we go. All right. So on the simpler side of things with Dynamic Apex, you can also do things like check and see information about a particular field. And we're going to dive into that as soon as I make this save. Why are we not? Non-static method cannot be referenced from static context. Did I not mark that as static? No, I didn't. That's why. It's the little things that get you. It's definitely the little things that get you. Or at least get me. At least get me. All right, saving. Please install. There's a spell check extension. What's wrong with this? Static can only be used on top level types. Oh, fluffer nutter. Okay. So we'll come down here. And we'll say dot new. Fine, be that way. Okay, somebody told me there's a spell checker. Code spell checker. Look at that. Installing. Thank you, SF Nerdy. That's amazing. All right. All right, did it let us save this yet? Can the user Did eventually save. Okay, so we're going to go back on to looking at some other bits of a dynamic Apex. Specifically, we're going to look at the way the schema stuff works. So we're going to look at using field tokens to grab information about our org. And the way to do that, we're just going to, I'm going to go over here and I'm going to put it in the, let's see, where should I do it? We'll do schema recipes. I think that makes sense. So I'll create a folder here and we'll do new folder, schema recipes, and what we'll do is we'll create a new class, schema recipes, custom directory, schema recipes. Okay, now what do we always do? We always put a doc block in, responsible for showing how to use schema and schema tokens. Okay, and we don't use that. Boop, boop, boop. Okay, get rid of that. Now we're going to do inherited. And will this is going to pick up misspelled words? No, it's not picking it up. Okay, I was totally psyched for that. Okay, so with this, you can totally determine interesting things about your org. Now, you could always do a schema.global describe, and that takes forever. So when we're talking about something you might cache a global describe. If you need to do a global describe, you should definitely cache it, put it in your org cache or put it in your session cache. And just be mindful of the fact that if you need to check it again, you might have to go nuke that cache entry. You might have to delete it in order to refresh it. Okay, because if you cache something for 8 hours and then 2 hours into it, you change your org shape, then you might want to refresh that cache. But for this, we're going to do public void demonstrate. What should we? We'll call this one schema token recipe. Schema token recipe. I'm not sold on that name. I might change it. Okay, and for this, what we're going to do is we're going to grab the describe information for a particular field on a particular object. So what we're going to do is we're going to say, we're going to use the account name. Pretty simple. All right, so we're going to do schema dot s object field, and we're going to call this the token is equal to, and we're going to say account dot name. Now, you'll notice I get a little squiggly here. It's not real sure what this is about. It's telling me that it can't access the static. It's not a static property. In this situation, you can ignore this because what we're doing is we're setting the schema token. And a schema token is the object dot, a schema token is the object dot name of a object dot field API name. So we can do schema 2. We'll do schema s object field token 2. We'll do I've got some junction objects. If we look at our junction JSON here, you can see that I've got parent 1 and parent 2. So we'll pull those out as a example of a custom object. We'll do junction dot like that. Okay, so we've got some, I should put a semicolon there. Got some tokens there. And then what we're going to do is we're going to just verify that our token is a token. And why are we doing this? Well, since you're using a token, you don't necessarily know that you spelled that correctly, right? And we all know that I have issues with spelling. So what we're going to do is we're going to say, we're going to do a system assert, and we're going to call this one token dot get s object field And this is going to come back and say that this is account name. Like that. So our token, we're verifying our token here. And I'll show you why we're going to do this here in just a second. Right? So we're going to say this is our token, and then what we're going to do is we're going to get the describe results. So we're going to say schema.describe field result. I'm going to call this DFR because I'm creative like that. And then we'll call is equal to DFR, excuse me, is equal to our token dot, nope, I did that wrong. Okay, so we've got our token, and then we have to go and get the, okay, so what we need to do is after we have our token, we have to say schema dot describe field result and define our DFR here, and then we're going to grab that with our token. So we're going to say schema dot sObject field, or sObject type, and we'll say type.account dot fields dot name. Okay, and that'll give us the token back. And so when we call this DFR, this is what we're verifying here. I had that backwards, and I'm going to change my describe field result now to get my DFR dot get sObject field. Lots of typing today. Get describe. Okay. Now, why are we doing this with the verification and all that sort of jazz? Well, if you look at this, this looks a heck of a lot like a string. And what we're going to do in the 7 minutes remaining is try and figure out how we can dynamically create this. Okay. And this is, after all, dynamic Apex. But first I'm going to save this, and I'm just going to run it so that we can verify that, baseline, this is working as expected. Saving. Failed to run. Oh, that's because it's already predefined. I defined it up there. That's my bad. Try that again. Okay, now I just realized we don't have this returning anything or doing anything, so we're going to do system debug DFR. Like that. Okay, and we're going to go back over to our ye old execute anonymous, and we're going to call this we're going to call schema recipes dot, did I make that static? Public void, nope. So we'll do new schema recipes dot token. I always forget what I call my methods when I'm doing this. Token recipe, like that. And we will run this. Execute anonymous. What? It is refresh sObject definitions. See if that works. Because that didn't want to do that, let's use the execute anonymous window, and we'll do schema recipes dot schema token recipe, and we have to do new schema recipes because I did not make that. Here we go, and we'll execute that, and this says it's a success. So let's go ahead and open this. Loading the views content. Okay, if we look at the debug output, you can see that we've got all this information about the actual field itself. Now, in that format, it's not terribly useful. So let's look at how we do this dynamically. So this is a sort of a static one, and we've got the sObject field token and the token 2. Let's look about how we might make a token from a string. Schema token from string. Salesforce. Using field tokens. Specify the field as a string. This is interesting. Maybe there's a built-in way for doing this, and I'm not going to have to like dynamicize it. It said specify the field name as a string. Schema account.field name. Okay, great. How do I do that? In 4 minutes or less, how do we do that? Get describe, subject, field describe, field result. Okay, well, I'm going to try it this way. Down here, we've got a describe field result for schema.sObject.account. Let's try this. Dot fields. This codeLive are great because I can, okay, and then we'll do it. Okay, thank you, Joseph. I'm trying to field name. I'm trying to, I want to know how to do that dynamically. I feel like I've done this before and I'm just trying to remember how to do it. Describing sObjects using schema methods. Types, account, merchandise. Maybe this is how we do it. Objects, types. Nope, those are different. We want the field. Result. Fields.map. Understanding describe information using tokens. So not using a token. Interesting. Well, I'm afraid we are out of time. We have a minute left, and I have to figure out how to do this because I know I've done it before, and I remember thinking it was easy, and then I didn't like write notes on how to do that because I remember thinking I've done this before. So yes, never rely on your memory for important things before coding. Thank you very much for joining me today. I look forward to seeing you all on Thursday. I'm going to have a very special guest, Simon Goodyear, and we're going to be working on one trigger to rule them all. Literally one trigger, every object to rule them all. You'll write one trigger only, and you'll be able to control everything with that one trigger. So join us on Thursday for an interesting codeLive session with a very good friend, Simon Goodyear. So thank you very much, and I look forward to seeing you then.